They thought you'd wait forever. They thought you'd stay stuck, haunted by old texts, scrolling through memories like they were your only home. They thought you'd break down, cry, collapse, cling, but instead, you got quiet, still, focused, and that's when everything changed. See, people with avoidant tendencies thrive on one illusion, that you'll never stop showing up, that your patience is permanent, that your love is leverage. But the moment you snapped out of that spell, the moment you stopped orbiting their silence like it was gravity, they lost control. Because now, you're not waiting, you're walking. Let's cut the fluff. You used to explain yourself to them. You tried to be understanding. You gave space, made excuses, forgave what should have been deal breakers. But silence isn't always peace. Distance isn't always maturity. Sometimes it's just emotional cowardice in disguise. And when you finally saw it for what it was, you didn't explode. You evolved. As Epictetus once said, we cannot choose our external circumstances, but we can always choose how we respond to them. And you did. You chose you. That choice, it shifted everything. Not just for you, but for them. Because now they're the one wondering, what happened? Why aren't they chasing? Why does it feel like I lost something I never appreciated? Here's the raw truth. They didn't expect your glow-up. They expected your breakdown. They thought you'd fold without their breadcrumbs. They thought you needed their validation to breathe. They thought walking away from you would put you on pause. But it pressed play on your healing, your mindset, your comeback. And now they can't ignore what you've become in their absence. Dangerous, grounded, whole. And that right there, that's what hits the hardest. Because you didn't get loud. You didn't post revenge pictures. You didn't fake a flex. You got disciplined. You got unreachable. You got so deeply centered that they can't recognize the version of you they once dismissed. He who conquers himself is the mightiest warrior. Confucius. Guess what? You stopped fighting for someone who couldn't meet you and started fighting for yourself. The people who thought you'd always be there are terrified when you finally choose peace over potential. Because once you detach from their chaos, you stop playing the role they cast you in. You're not their emotional punching bag. You're not their backup plan. You're not their placeholder until they figure themselves out. You're gone, and not in the way they thought. You've leveled up so far beyond them, they'd need a telescope to catch a glimpse. Now they want to know what happened. They want to know why you're not flinching, why your energy feels so untouchable, why you're not even curious anymore. Because here's the paradox. The moment you stop needing someone is the moment they start needing you. And no, it's not revenge. It's resonance. You raised your frequency. They just stayed stuck. Seneca said it best. It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it. And you've stopped wasting yours on people who weaponize distance. You're no longer feeding someone who only shows up when they're starving for attention. Now, they're the ones starving. Starving for the access they used to take for granted. Starving for the comfort they never earned. Starving for your energy. But it's no longer for sale. So if you're still watching, here's the truth. They didn't lose you when they walked away. They lost you when you stopped waiting. And in this video, you're going to learn exactly how your silence becomes your power, how your growth becomes the closure they never saw coming, and why you're never looking back, not out of anger, but out of awareness. Watch to the end, because your healing arc isn't a story about getting them back. It's a story about never needing them again. If you're done shrinking to keep someone else comfortable, if you've finally realized your peace costs more than their presence, comment below. They lost me when I found myself. Say it like a declaration. Say it because you're not confused anymore. Say it because you've graduated from their story. Your mantra, they lost me when I found myself. Type it now. Claim it. Let's go deeper. Stay focused. Let's talk about that moment. Not the day they left. Not the day they ghosted. Not even the day they said, I just need space. No, the day you stopped pretending not to see the game. Because deep down you knew. You saw the patterns, the hot and cold, the delayed replies, the sudden distance dressed up as I'm just busy. You felt the shift. But you gaslit yourself into silence. Told yourself, maybe I'm overthinking. Maybe I'm too sensitive. Maybe they just need time. But no, they weren't confused. They were comfortable. Comfortable knowing that no matter how poorly they communicated, you'd still be there, waiting, hoping, filling in their blanks with fantasy. And then it happened. That click in your brain, that internal rebellion. You looked in the mirror and said, I'm not doing this anymore. That single thought, that one act of self-honesty is what shattered the cycle. Because the truth is, you weren't addicted to them. You were addicted to the hope that someday they'd finally choose you without you having to beg for it. But when you finally saw that hope for what it was, a leash, you did something most people never do. You stopped hoping, and you started healing. That's when everything flipped. That's when the dynamic cracked. Because avoidant people only thrive when you're afraid of losing them. But you became fearless. Let me be blunt. They didn't expect that version of you to show up. The one who sees clearly, the one who calls the bluff, the one who says, this isn't love, it's emotional dodgeball. And once that version of you came alive, they couldn't look at you the same way. Because now, you're not playing dumb to keep the peace. You're not ignoring red flags to preserve the fantasy. You're not minimizing your own needs just to feel chosen. Now you've become dangerous, because clarity is a weapon. And when you finally stopped lying to yourself, they lost the ability to lie to you too. Key point 2. They didn't pull away because you were too much. They pulled away because you saw too clearly. Let's kill the narrative right now. They didn't distance themselves because you were needy. They didn't vanish because you were too intense. They didn't freeze up because you cared too deeply. They pulled away because you started asking the right questions, because your energy was no longer passive, because you stopped entertaining half-effort, because you stopped clapping for bare minimum. That's what scared them. Avoidants don't fear closeness. They fear accountability inside closeness. They want proximity without responsibility. They want intimacy without the mirror. They want your softness without having to earn your consistency. And when you started waking up, when your energy shifted from, I hope they like me, to, I hope they're built for me, they panicked, because that energy, that awareness, it's undeniable. And People who rely on confusion and ambiguity can't survive in the presence of someone who's finally paying attention. When you show up authentically, you threaten every version of them built on pretending. Unknown. And that's the truth they don't want you to realize. They weren't afraid of you. They were afraid of what being with you required. Presence, depth, emotional maturity. They couldn't just disappear for days and slide back in like nothing happened. They couldn't weaponize silence and expect you to chase. They couldn't keep you in emotional purgatory while reaping the benefits of your loyalty. Because now you're watching their behavior with sober eyes. And they've never looked smaller. Let me say this clearly. You were never too much. They were just never built to meet someone who wanted more than surface-level survival. You weren't asking for too much. You were just asking the wrong person. And now you see the truth. It wasn't your intensity that pushed them away. It was your clarity that exposed their limits. Key point 3. The real glow-up isn't physical. It's when they can no longer manipulate your peace. Let's get one thing straight. Your glow-up isn't about a new haircut. It's not about gym selfies or designer clothes. It's not about looking better so they'll regret it. The real glow-up is when they no longer have emotional leverage over you, when their silence doesn't shake you, when their inconsistency no longer triggers the urge to prove your worth. That's the version of you they never expected to meet. You see, they fed off your reactions. They mistook your vulnerability for weakness. Every time you reached out first, they logged it as proof that you'd never walk away. But then, you stopped. Not out of bitterness, but out of brutal self-respect. You didn't slam the door. You didn't make a scene. You just quietly removed your energy, and that's when they really felt the loss. Because here's the twist. Most people don't realize they were being held up until you step back and let the dead weight fall. If you want to find out who someone is, stop giving them what they haven't earned. Unknown. And when you did that, everything changed. No more over-explaining. No more rewriting texts 5 times to sound chill. No more taking emotional breadcrumbs and calling it love. You reclaimed your peace, and they couldn't access it anymore. That's what shook them. Because once you control your inner world, you become unshakable in the outer one. Now they're the one checking your stories. Now they're the one feeling uneasy. Now they're the one realizing that your attention was never the default. It was a privilege. But here's the part they didn't see coming. You don't even want them anymore. Not because you hate them, but because you outgrew the version of yourself who needed their confusion to feel alive. That's not ego. That's evolution. Key point 4. You didn't just move on, you moved up. Let's be clear, you didn't just get over them. You didn't just block and distract yourself with someone new. This wasn't a rebound, it was a rebirth. Because moving on is surface level. But moving up? That's internal. That's real. You didn't just leave them behind. You left behind the version of you who tolerated their inconsistency. You upgraded your standards. You elevated your mindset. You stopped mistaking emotional chaos for chemistry. And that shift, that's what haunts them now. They thought your silence was you sulking. They thought your distance was petty. They thought you'd come back eventually. But what they didn't see is that while they were still trying to figure things out, you figured yourself out. You didn't chase closure. You created clarity. And that version of you? That's the one they were never prepared to meet. Because now, you're not emotionally reactive. You're emotionally unavailable to people who haven't done the work. You will never be able to escape from your heart. So it's better to listen to what it has to say. Paulo Coelho. And your heart said enough. Enough shrinking. Enough overgiving. Enough settling for almost. They didn't lose you when they ghosted. They didn't lose you when they said, "I'm not ready." They lost you the moment you realized your love was never the problem. You were just giving it to someone unequipped to hold it. Now hear this part carefully. I outgrew the version they ignored. That's your secret mantra. Drop it in the comment. That's your truth. That's the sentence you type when you know you didn't just survive the breakup. You surpassed the illusion. So if you're reading this and you feel that in your bones, type it in the comments. Say it like a contract with your future self. I outgrew the version they ignored. Because once you've grown past who they left, there's nothing left to go back to. Your key point 5. Their silence doesn't hurt you anymore. It exposes them. You remember how their silence used to wreck you. The late replies, the ignored messages, the ghosting just when things got real, and worst of all, how you made excuses for it. You called it giving them space. You told yourself, maybe they're overwhelmed, maybe they're busy, maybe I'm overreacting. But let's call it what it was, emotional manipulation by omission. And now? Now their silence is loud. Not because you miss them, but because it reveals who they truly are. When you stop internalizing someone else's emotional avoidance as your flaw, you regain everything. Your sanity, your power, your presence. Because that silence isn't deep. It isn't wise. It's not some mature, stoic thing. It's just immaturity in disguise. They weren't trying to protect your feelings. They were trying to protect their control. The opposite of love is not hate. It's indifference. Elie Wiesel. They gave you indifference and called it boundaries. But real boundaries come with communication. Their silence. That was just convenience. And the truth is, they didn't expect you to stop waiting. They thought you'd still be decoding their mixed signals, still reading into likes and views like they meant something, still giving them power for doing the bare minimum of existing. But you stopped playing that game. Now, when they go silent, it's not a cliffhanger. It's closure. You don't chase silence anymore, you outgrow it. So here's the final punch. They can't trigger what you've healed. They can't confuse what you've clarified. They can't hurt what you've hardened through fire. Their silence doesn't pull you in, it pushes them out. Because you finally see it. Silence without accountability isn't peace, it's cowardice. And you? You've leveled so far beyond that. You don't even flinch when they disappear. You just keep moving. Key point 6. You stopped showing up. Now they're obsessed with your absence. Let's be real, they didn't appreciate your presence when it was consistent. They didn't value your support when it was unconditional. They didn't respect your effort when it was free-flowing. But the second you stopped showing up, now suddenly they're watching, subtly lurking, liking old posts, replying to your story with "haha," just to see if the door's still cracked open. Why? Because your absence is louder than your presence ever was. People don't realize what you brought to the table until they're forced to sit at it alone. You gave connection, you gave depth, you gave safety, and they treated it like background noise. But when that energy disappears, when you go full ghost, not out of pettiness but peace, that's when the mirror shows up. They're not haunted by what you said. They're haunted by what you stopped saying. Here's the irony. They wanted space. They wanted freedom. They wanted to figure themselves out. Cool. But now that they have it, now that you're not checking in, not initiating, not orbiting, they're scrambling. Because they never expected you to actually mean it when you detached. They thought you'd wait. They thought you'd fold. They thought your boundaries were temporary. Turns out, they were your final warning. The only thing more powerful than presence is intentional absence. Unknown. And that's what you've mastered. You're not giving silent treatment. You're giving self-respect. You're not punishing anyone. You're just not performing anymore. And now they're stuck in the one place they never wanted to be. On the outside of your peace, looking in. You used to chase clarity. Now you are the clarity. And the version of you that once waited for them. Gone. They can sense it. And now they're the one wondering what it means when you go quiet. Because once they can't predict your response, they start questioning everything. Key point 7. They didn't leave you, they lost their anchor. Let's be honest. They didn't leave, they self-destructed. And you were the stability they mistook for weakness, the consistency they interpreted as convenience, the emotional grounding they never knew how to value, because they'd never built it for themselves. You weren't the clingy one, you weren't the over-invested one, you were the anchor. And when people aren't grounded in themselves, they reject anyone who feels stable, because it threatens the chaos they've grown comfortable with. They thought they could leave you and feel free. They thought cutting you off would feel empowering. But what they didn't understand is that your presence wasn't a cage. It was a compass. You gave them a safe place to land. You were emotionally fluent. You were ready. They weren't. So instead of rising to meet you, they ran. Not because you were wrong for them, but because you were too right for where they were in their own growth. You can't save someone from the storm if they think chaos is home. Unknown. You weren't overwhelming. You weren't overgiving. You were just clear. And that clarity forced them to face a version of themselves they weren't ready to meet. They wanted the benefits of your presence without the responsibility of showing up. But you can't hold someone up forever who keeps cutting off the hand that supports them. And once you let go, they felt it instantly. Now they're not just missing you. They're missing their emotional anchor, the steady hand, the text that made them feel grounded, the energy that gave them a sense of safety in a world they keep running from. But here's the truth they can't admit. They didn't walk away from a person. They walked away from alignment, from growth, from peace, from love that required them to grow up. And you've stopped anchoring people who want to float in and out of your life without commitment. You're done keeping others grounded at the cost of your own elevation. They didn't leave you. They lost the best shot they had at stability. And now that you're no longer holding it all together, they're the one drifting. You didn't lose them. You found. Let's bring this home. You didn't get left behind. You didn't get rejected. You got redirected back to yourself. Because they didn't walk away from someone who was too much. They walked away from someone who wasn't willing to shrink anymore. And now you see it clearly. You weren't the weak one. You were the rooted one, You were the real one. While they were chasing distractions, you were building discipline. While they were numbing, you were healing. While they avoided accountability, you owned your story. And now you're standing in a version of yourself they were never meant to reach. This was never about proving your worth. It was about remembering it. So don't you dare lower your standards again just to feel chosen. Don't you dare water down your truth for people who only know how to sip, never pour. You didn't lose anything when they left. They did. They lost the version of you that would have given them everything. You meet people where they are, but you don't stay there with them. You're not staying stuck. You're not replaying the story. You're not biting your tongue to keep a broken bond intact. You're walking forward. No explanation, no announcement, just evolution. So here's what I want you to do right now. Comment this below. They lost me when I found myself. Say it because you're done shrinking. Say it because your peace isn't negotiable. Say it because you're no longer available to be half-loved by anyone, including the old version of yourself. And if that line hits, drop this one too. I outgrew the version they ignored. Make that your second declaration. Let it echo. This is your closure. This is your rebirth. This is the story they'll never get access to again. Because the healed version of you doesn't speak the same language as the one who once begged. You didn't just move on. You became untouchable. And the most powerful thing you can do now, keep walking, keep building, keep becoming. Your next chapter doesn't need them, it needs you. Fully present, fully healed, fully powerful. I'll see you at the top. Because now, you're not waiting, you're rising.